Welcome to Rights and Remedies, the podcast where law, advocacy, and healing come together. I'm Allison Mahoney, your host and a lawyer dedicated to fighting for the rights of survivors of domestic and sexual abuse, as well as children harmed by the child welfare system. Each week, we delve into legal battles and court cases, share powerful stories that demand change, and spotlight the cutting-edge practices that are helping victims on their journey to healing. So, if you're ready to dive into the intersection of advocacy and healing, subscribe to Rights and Remedies today. New episodes are released weekly, and we can't wait to have you join the conversation. Together, we can make a difference. Welcome back to Rights and Remedies. Before we begin today's episode, please be advised that we'll be discussing sensitive topics, including sexual assault and a sexual assault trial, which may be triggering for some listeners. So if you need to take a break or skip this episode altogether, please do so and always prioritize your own well-being. I'm very excited for today's guest. Liz Entin, my friend, is joining us. She is an entrepreneur of two businesses, WTF and Why Get Wasted. She's also a podcaster. Welcome, Liz. Thank you so much for being here.
So much for having me. And actually, it's WTF just happened. Sorry, just so people
Oh,
aren't lost if they're Googling it and trying to figure it out.
so maybe that's a good place to start. What are your two businesses?
Sure. So WTF just happened. Unfortunately, in 2015, my dad passed away, and I'm like Jewish, but very secular Jew and atheist. And so I decided to investigate if there could be any science-based evidence of afterlife, survival of consciousness. And I was like, there's so much research. And I was just absolutely blown away and I expected nothing. So I ended up writing books, launching a podcast, and actually the second book in the series, although the focus is on afterlife evidence, it does talk about the trial we'll be talking about today too, and my involvement in it. And Why Get Wasted, we work with events, commercials, films to help them reduce and divert waste and be more climate friendly. So
Amazing. Thank you, Liz. Thanks for all you're doing. So,
thank you.
listeners have heard us mention a trial. Liz is on today because she was a witness in both of the New York trials against Harvey Weinstein, so we're going to talk about that today. And just to recap some of the background for those, I'm sure most people have heard of Harvey Weinstein and the trial, but to go over the history quickly. So, in October of 2017, the New York Times and other outlets came forward. The New York Times was kind of the seminal, or the place where all of this was initially released. They reported that dozens of women had accused Harvey Weinstein, who is a famous film producer, of sexual assault, sexual abuse, and rape. And the alleged abuses had spanned over, it was like 30 years. And May of 2018, he was ultimately arrested in New York City and charged with sexual assault and other offenses. In 2020, he was found guilty, but that conviction was overturned on appeal in 2024. And then subsequently in, I think it was 2024 or early 2025. I think it was 2024. Manhattan prosecutors again filed charges and he was indicted by a grand jury. And in June of 2025, he was convicted on the retrial in a split verdict. So he was found guilty of sexually assaulting one woman and not guilty of sexually assaulting another. Did I get most of that right, Liz?
And then the third case was a mistrial, and I don't know if they're going to retry it or not. I believe it was a hung jury for
Okay.
the third woman.
Okay. So obviously, most people are not professional witnesses in these types of trials. Can you share? Let's start with the first trial. First of all, why were you called as a witness in this case?
So I was what's called a secondary witness, and I was testifying on behalf of my friend who was my roommate at the time of the assault, Miriam Haley. She also goes by Mimi. And because I knew about this story, and just a heads up, I'm not really going to go into the details of her story because I don't really feel it's my place, but I'll talk about anything about my involvement with
Yeah.
it. And so I knew the details because of what she had told me right after it happened. So I was then brought in as what's called a secondary witness to corroborate her story.
Okay. And I was just going to ask for those who don't know, what is a secondary witness?
So it means you were an eyewitness, is you were there. Like either, you're the one he assaulted or you physically see it. And a secondary witness is they, you know, I am corroborating Miriam's story because she told me.
Okay. Okay. Um, how did you feel when you found out that you were going to be called potentially as a witness in the case?
Oh my God. Well, first of all, I didn't think I was going to be chosen. I was shocked. Like it didn't even cross my mind I would be called. And sort of a funny story, when I got the call, I had just been dismissed from jury duty the day before. And I'm listening to my voicemails and I hear, this is the Manhattan DA District Attorney's Office. We're looking for Elizabeth Entin. I was like, oh my God. I was like, I fucked up. I was supposed to be at jury duty, or maybe they're calling me back, but like, what else could this be about? So I like run into this, private phone booth at a co-work space, like hands shaking. And immediately they're like, is this the Elizabeth Entin who knows Miriam Haley? And I was like, oh my God, it's the Harvey Weinstein case. Because I didn't delve into any of the details of it, but I had just noticed she was involved in the case. And I knew tons of people were. I wasn't even sure they were going to bring her officially on board. So, I mean, I was happy to be involved. I was like, I hate him. I wanted him to get justice. And I was, I was shocked, happy that they called me, but I also, did not think in the end I'd end up testifying.
Were you nervous at all?
Yes, but I'd say the most nervous I was like the day before. I was just, and then like walking in that first moment, because, we'd gone over, you know, they ask you tons and tons of questions. I guess I was asked questions and kind of they were getting more and more information on my story for maybe over a year before the first time I testified. So I'd been in the courtroom. So suddenly walking in, I was like, oh my God, now this is real. And I assume it's not the typical trial because it was like packed. There was press
Yeah.
everywhere. It was just very intense.
So
And
when you prepared with the prosecutors, did they bring you into the courtroom beforehand?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I don't even know if to prepare, but just because I was going so much, they're like, hey, want to see the room? So,
Yeah.
and this was
Yeah.
the first time. The second time I got hardly any preparation. So,
I feel like that's helpful, especially for people who haven't testified before, to have an understanding of what it's going to look like when you're in this space. And obviously, it's going to be really different when it's packed with spectators and the defendant's there and the judge is there and the jury is there. But having like a little bit of the lay of the land in your head can ease some of the tensions. And okay, so focusing on the first trial, uh, tell us what it was like to testify. And I also want you to tell the story about your dog,
oh, of course.
who I've met.
Peanut. Yeah, you met Peanut, not
I've
just
met Peanut.
Pickles.
Oh no. Oh no, I've met Pickles, not Peanut.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Peanut passed in
Okay.
like 2018. So I
Okay.
think
I
we
met
became,
Pickles.
yeah, okay. Um, so what was it like? I mean, this is probably not the typical response. Like, I loved it. Like, as I've spoken about with Allison, like, I was thinking of maybe going to law school after this experience. Like, I'm trying to even describe like what I loved about it. It was for a cause I really care about. It was directly helping a person I really care about. It was something I knew had happened that like bottled up for a very long time. And then what I loved about this process was it's so fast. It's like things are coming at you and you have to think on your feet in less than a split second. And all you have is yourself. All you have is your intellect. And then you want to bring in wit and I mean, obviously telling the truth, but
Mhm.
they're coming at you to twist your words and you just have to come back. And I liked the fight. I liked like that way of fighting, like bringing
And you
Yeah,
mean
I guess like
during cross-examination is what you're talking about?
during cross-examination. Yeah, during I don't remember the proper word, but like the normal examination or
Direct.
direct.
Direct examination.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it didn't have that charge of cross-examination. Cross-examination was my favorite, but direct I know.
This
I
is not the typical experience or reaction that people have when
That's
they
why I want to go
testify.
to law school. I'm like, this is my favorite thing I've ever done, you know. Direct, it was obviously safer and it was like kind of yeah, it's satisfying in the sense of like again, like you this was the first time I testified was I guess I had testified in the first grand jury. Actually the second because there were two
Ah,
grand juries. It was a very complicated case. So the case was brought before the grand jury twice for the first New York trial because another woman came on
I see.
which yeah, so they had to retry it because they were bringing up stronger charges. They were bringing up predatory sexual assault with this new testimony, which apparently is, I mean, you might know this more than me, but I believe that is the strongest charge of sexual assault someone can get, and it carries the longest jail time, which is why they retried it through the grand jury. So I had told it once before in the grand jury, which is a much safer experience because there's no cross examination. And I felt released. I was nervous and maybe, because that was my first time doing it. And I was surprised. They told me that morning, they're like, we're going now to the grand jury. And
Yeah, and the grand
I,
jury proceedings are very secret. And so nothing from
oh,
that happens in a grand jury can be talked about. So the grand jury proceeding itself isn't a secret, but what happens in the grand jury is completely secret. I didn't
okay.
realize. So you testified in the grand jury, and then you also testified at two multiple grand juries and multiple trials.
I testified at one grand jury.
Grand jury.
Only the second one applied to the first trial of
Got
New
it.
York. And
Okay.
that one I've just found releasing. It was like, it was my friend's story. So I hadn't really told
Mhm.
many people at all. It's not my story to tell. He's a famous person. Out of respect to her, it was just not a story I really talked about very much. But so it felt very releasing and satisfying. And it felt like I wasn't just telling it to release, I was telling it for justice and a cause and
Mhm.
and so that was the very first time. But like, I didn't love it, but like the second one, like, yeah, I absolutely like, yeah, I don't think
Second
this is
trial
terrible.
that
Like
you mean.
yeah, the main trial was like the part I loved. And it was, yeah, it's just like, I liked the battle. I liked like, you have to immediately, like, you have to come back instantly and you have to come back cleverly and you have to come back,
Mhm.
wording things in a way that are digestible to a jury while also completely telling the truth. You want to tell
Yeah.
the story, but you have to, you can't just sit the way you could during direct and tell the story. It's like the truth of the story is being twisted and like changed around and by someone coming at you very aggressively. And yeah,
And I
I don't know.
imagine they were probably not really asking you questions, but were making statements that then you were expected to say yes or no to, which is what lawyers are trained to do on cross-examination. Is that what
Yeah,
happened?
kind of, but I wouldn't do that. And so I was like, yeah, which it was mentioned actually both times. The lawyers were like, "Can you tell her to answer the question? She's going on like these diatribes." Because I wouldn't answer the way they were trying to pigeonhole me into, and so.
I want to hear the dog story.
Oh, the dog story is the best.
And this made the news, right?
This went viral.
Yeah.
So I have a famous Chihuahua now. Um, yeah, and this was part of the first trial, but not part of the second. There were more constraints. I'm um I'm allowed. I don't know what I don't want to screw anything up. I'm allowed to say like there were more constraints of how I was allowed to tell the story in the second trial.
Okay.
So, and I don't think I can go into any more than that, but
That's
so the first time, so one thing that had happened was, so when Miriam and I were roommates over the summer, my Chihuahua mix, Peanut, the sweetest little girl, just like all she wanted to do lives like love everybody and cuddle. Like I don't think a person met her who didn't just like fall in love with her. And she pretty much fell in love with almost everyone, except apparently one point, like before the assault, Harvey had come into our apartment uninvited. I wasn't there, but Peanut chased him around and he was terrified. He was like running in circles and she's running after him, barking and barking. And he was terrified. He's like, "What is this thing? Get it away from me." And Miriam had told me this, and we thought it was hilarious. And again, obviously, before he assaulted her, like this was a joke. So then that came up in the first trial. And, I leave. I decide not to walk past the press line. I have no idea what's going on. So apparently, Harvey walked past the press line, and one woman was like, excuse me, Mr. Weinstein, are you afraid of chihuahuas? That clip and just the story in general went viral around the world. It was like in China and Africa. Headlines were like, I think my favorite was the New York Post. It was like Harvey Weinstein was once one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, but he was no match for Peanut the Chihuahua. There was like a series of syndicated articles called Rough Justice, RUFF. Peanut's photo was everywhere. She got a segment on Court TV, like a
Oh my
15-minute
God.
segment. So
That's incredible.
yeah, it was, oh my God. And she had just passed away like maybe
Oh
about a year ago. So it was like so emotional for me too. And
my
it was
gosh.
insane.
Yeah,
So
I remember when this happened, you telling me about it. Um, okay, and so when did you find out that you were potentially going to have to testify again? And how did you feel upon learning that news?
Um, I kind of didn't, I mean, I just sort of didn't believe. I was like, they're not going to do this again. And then Miriam had just messaged, she was like, I think you might need to testify again. And I was like, oh, so then we're like, we knew we had to stop talking if that was an option, even though we had gotten back in touch after the first verdict. So she was just like, we just basically stopped talking. And I was like, I can't believe that. I can't believe that. And she just was like, is it okay if I give your name again to the attorneys? I was like, definitely. And yeah, so then, and the fact that like she kind of stopped communicating with me too, I was like, yeah, I'm almost definitely going to have to. And then they called me and they're asking me like my schedule. And I assumed it was going to be like 6 months. I thought it was going to be a long time. And they're like, oh, it's next week. Just
Oh,
because the
wow.
first time there'd been so much time. And I was like, wow, okay. I'm like, I'm ready. Like, I don't want him to get away with this. And what I felt like revved up. I felt like, you know what? Don't fuck with people. Like, you're not going to get away with it. Like, bring it. And I also felt like really, really, really sad because we are at a point now, and this happened at a point where there are a significant amount of people just based on their skin color, just based on their, where they were born, where their parents were born, their life circumstances, where they've had their due process revoked and they're getting no due process and for doing nothing. They're being put basically in concentration camps. And it's only gotten significantly worse since this time, but it was starting at the time I was asked to testify. And I was like, here is one man who has, I mean, raped my friend Miriam, allegedly raped like God knows how many women. Like it seems to be about 100. And because of his money and power, he is getting a level of chance at justice that like 0.00001% have. And the discrepancy is horrible. It's disgusting. I actually don't even mind that he appealed this and was able to, but I don't think that should be a privilege. I feel like anyone who has a life sentence, what he got and the rights he got, I actually think are maybe it could be argued, is it a fair example? I don't think it was right to overturn it, but I think everybody should have access to that level to fight for themselves no matter what they did. And so it just, I guess, kind of broke my heart at the complete discrepancy and that this is such a rare privilege. And then I thought it was
Mean
like
that Do you mean that he had the resources to hire like a high quality legal team?
Yes, multiple times to keep appealing and appealing and appealing until it was overturned. And yes, in one sense, actually, I do think that's kind of how it should be for everybody who has life sentences. And then, and just, yeah, the difference between where there's also a group of people who aren't even getting any due process. And so I was really kind of emotionally affected by that and the huge discrepancy.
Right.
And
And just
yeah,
to
so I,
clarify one thing, I don't think he got a life sentence, but he was sentenced to a number of decades, which, given his age, could equate to a life sentence.
yeah, that's more what I meant. Like anyone who would spend the rest of their life
Yeah.
in jail should I'm I think it was like 23 years for
I
this
think,
plus another in LA, non-consecutive. I mean, it was I don't remember the exact, but yeah, there was a guarantee the rest of his life was going to be in jail. So I had a lot of feelings about it. And
yeah.
yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about like, as as a witness, when you were,
Mhm.
are there, well, I've never testified as a witness. I've asked people questions about to testify
Really?
as a witness, but I've never done it. Um, For people who maybe are afraid to file a case against someone for fear of having to testify or report something to the police because they're afraid of what it would, of potentially having to testify in court. Some of the things that you did, you mentioned that you felt nervous the day before, but like what helped you to feel more confident and clear-headed and calm when you went into court and were being peppered with questions by the defense attorney? Any tools that you can share?
Yeah, I think I was just really, really mad. I was like, this is so wrong. Like, people should not get away with doing horrible things. And granted, this is so much easier to say as a secondary witness, so much easier. Like, I have testified, I didn't actually have to testify, but I went to court for myself once and it was just housing court. And it was a different layer of emotion
Yeah.
when it was about myself, because I think, but nevertheless, I think for me, it was just like, whatever the outcome, I don't have control over that, but I'm going to live as the kind of person that, like, your shit stops with me. Like, no. And I found that mindset empowering and just like, whatever happens, I'm not going to be the kind of person that like lets people be abusive, be bullies, be cruel, and I'll do all of my power to fight that. And I found that just like incredibly empowering. And then I felt a little bit body language. Like I walked in like take no prisoners, and just got myself into that. And actually, yeah, Arthur Adelia, apparently his lawyer did like in his closing arguments of the second one did like a funny imitation of me. I found it funny. I don't know. Maybe some people would be bothered. He like stomped around the courtroom and like would point accusingly and be like, Mr. Harvey Weinstein. And I was like, yeah, yeah,
You did
So I
that?
think, oh, I was like, yeah. Oh, I mean, I sort of, I didn't like stomp in like an idiot, but I like walked in like, I am ready to destroy, and I sort of had that energy in me. And I feel this is again speaking as a secondary witness. I would feel like, I would want somebody to come fight for me to that level. And
Mhm. Mhm.
just, yeah, it was just like, this is war, like that type of energy. And I think the energy I used during the cross examination, I mean, again, I might want to go to law school. I don't, it came very naturally. It was just like flowing. It was like being in like almost like that state of flow that people talk about. It was just like, ideas were coming and then having to figure out what to say, don't say this, not because, all of it based on the truth, but I'm like, oh, like I was in like warrior mode. So I'm like, if I say that, I'm like, I don't know, I'm probably getting held in contempt. So it was just like, it was embodying that part of myself. And of course, that's not the only part of myself. So it was like having to be like, that's what's coming in. And I think given this was a sexual assault case, it was like bring up a couple. And at the time in life it happened, especially the second one, it was like, one of the things I brought was like thinking of all the years of history women were never taken seriously. And I was like, what a privilege to get to be in a courtroom where people are listening.
Yeah.
And then I got to say, like, I told myself about the cross-examination that I was glad it was happening because due process is so under threat right now for such a large amount of people that I wouldn't that it should be. It's going how it should, and I'm participating in something how it should.
Yep.
And if I'm part of someone going to jail for a long time, like I want to be challenged on that. Otherwise, like imagine if you just your voice has so much power in that moment that you risk putting someone in jail. That shouldn't just be a light thing. And I don't think it would have sat right with me if
Yeah.
someone went to jail for that long without my voice being challenged beforehand.
Yep. I think that's exactly right. I think that's
Mhm.
exactly right. Well, thank you for what you did, Liz.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
And, if you do go to law school, I think you would be a very fierce advocate. I mean, I can hear the passion in your voice when you're talking about this experience now. And I'm sure your friend really appreciates your testifying for the prosecution,
Thank you.
and knowing that people were willing to stand up and explain what happened. So. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for being on today. And I guess one thing I'll ask in closing is, do you have any tips or words of encouragement that you would give someone who is looking at possibly having to testify in a court case, whether it's civil or criminal?
Yeah, just like I guess a little way of saying, like it stops with you. Like you are given a chance to be in that position to like get someone to the find out stage of the fuck around and find out. And that's like an incredible privilege and something to take with like a type of respect and like what an honor. Like there are some horrible people in the world and it's so sad and they cause harm. And you are having a chance to like bring our world is not fair and court cases seem to at least bring an ideal of the concept of fairness and you're getting to participate in that and however it turns out you are doing the right thing by fighting for the ideal of how our world should be.
Thank you, Liz. Well said.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll include information about Liz and her businesses in our show notes if anyone is curious or wants to get in touch. And I look forward to our next conversation. All right, thanks. Thank you for joining us on Rights and Remedies. I hope today's episode gave you valuable insights into the legal issues facing victims and the pathways to healing. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. Whether you're a survivor, an advocate, or someone looking to learn more, we're here to support and empower you. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others. You can also follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at ALM Law LLC for updates, resources, and more. Until next time, take care and remember that together we can make a difference.